Now, this might just be me kind of ranting a little bit at this point, but I find it extremely troublesome when Dave Ramsey has not taken the time to do the research to learn about cryptocurrencies to be able to help his listeners out with trying to invest in it. Dude, it's your job to help people with their money, and you won't even give Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies the time of day because it's hard? For your own good, for the good of your family, and for your future, grow a backbone. When something is wrong, stand up and say it's wrong. And don't back down. Well, Dave, you're wrong, and I'm not backing down. Okay, I know that's a bit dramatic, but there are some fundamental wealth building and money saving tactics that Dave Ramsey employs that I strongly disagree with. And to boot, some of his thoughts on certain things are actually quite extreme and can actually lead to the people who follow him to miss out on some phenomenal money-making opportunities. So in this video, I'm going to go through my top 3 reasons why I think Dave Ramsey is a little out of touch when it comes to personal finance. Plus, I have some math and real-world examples as well to prove my point. But who even is this guy anyways? He has branded himself exceptionally well. In fact, if you just Google personal finance guy, his is the first picture that shows up. Now, of course, you already know his name because of the title of the video, but he is Dave Ramsey, the debt is dumb, cash is king guy.
It's the Dave Ramsey Show, where debt is dumb, cash is king.
And if you didn't know who this guy was before coming to this video, that's not a big deal. You don't really need to know him. I'm gonna go through a little quick history lesson about who he is because it plays an important part of the arguments I'm gonna make. But if you didn't know who he was, I would wager that your dad knows who he is. In the 80s, Dave Ramsey graduated from college with a degree in both finance and real estate, and very quickly thereafter accumulated about $4 million worth of real estate assets.
I started buying and selling real estate in my 20s, starting from nothing.
Sure.
I had $4 million worth. I was a millionaire when I was 26.
Not that long after, a couple of laws changed, and the banks that had lent him this money to buy this real estate came a-knocking because they needed their money back.
Then I lost it all because the loans got called by the banks.
But sadly, of course, he had used their money to buy more real estate, and he had used all of his cash to buy even more real estate. He probably even got out more loans using the real estate he'd already bought as collateral for those loans. Now, sadly, of course, he was not able to pay these banks back and needed to declare personal bankruptcy to get out of it.
But I ended up bankrupt at 28.
I declare bankruptcy!
Long story short, he over-leveraged, had no cash, his credit was called back, and he basically lost everything because of it. Now, not long after this happened, he began giving personal finance advice to people so that they would not end up in the same situation as him. Of course, I don't know who would take personal finance advice from someone who had just declared bankruptcy, but he's been able to make a very comfortable living ever since then doing so. He's got books, courses, a pretty decently huge YouTube channel with just over 2 million subs, as well as a Sirius XM network all devoted to money and its purpose in life. And basically, when it comes to money, he's a total expert. He's been doing this a very long time, and he's a trusted source for financial advice. He knows his stuff. But does he? Which brings us to my arguments. We're gonna go through these one at a time, and I'm gonna start with probably the most important one and probably his entire philosophy, and then go from there. Reason number 1 that Dave Ramsey should not be listened to anymore. He thinks all debt is bad.
Debt sucks. Stop it. I'm not living like this anymore. I don't borrow money anymore. Don't call me and ask me when it's okay to borrow money. It's not. I've had it. Get it?
Now, in his defense, almost all debt is bad. Most debt is bad, and there's a pretty valid argument as well for saying that all debt is bad. And of course, from the small little history lesson I gave about him a moment ago, it would make sense why he thinks all debt is bad. Him being in debt was the whole reason he went into bankruptcy and had to make a arguably pretty profitable career change, if you ask me. But his philosophy on debt is a bit much, in that if you have any debt whatsoever, you need to get out of it as quickly as you possibly can. You need to put 110% of your effort into getting out of debt, because that debt carries potential risk that could totally destroy the foundation of your personal wealth altogether.
So I learned the hard way that risk is real, and that when you have debt, you are susceptible to getting your freaking head taken off.
There is such thing as not bad debt. Of course, assuming that you use the money in a very responsible manner. Now, Dave Ramsey back in the 80s was not using his debt responsibly, which is why it came back to bite him. He was a young guy in his 20s being overly aggressive, buying up tons of real estate. But the question you might be asking yourself right now is, at what point does debt become not bad debt? So my criteria for this, and the criteria of most financial advisors or experts in the community, would kind of agree with this as well. So again, I can't condone you taking finance advice from a guy on YouTube, but you're going to hear a very similar story basically anywhere you look. My criteria for what is considered good debt is debt that increases your income, builds wealth over time, has an interest rate of less than 4%, and is not being used to buy any depreciating assets like a car. Now, of course, the first two things that you should be thinking of when I say these is student loans and mortgages. But good luck to you trying to find a student loan with an interest rate below 4%. So we're going to focus on mortgages. So two great things about mortgages right now is that the interest being paid on them can be written off on your taxes when you itemize, and we are at historically low interest rates right now. Of course, that's due to the pandemic, but it's still a positive silver lining to this. But I will note on those low interest rates that interest rates have been steadily declining since the 80s when Dave Ramsey was buying up all that real estate. So if we turn back the clock and look at the interest rates when Dave Ramsey was buying up all this real estate, they were averaging around 10%. An average of 10% for these home loans that he was getting out. That's bad debt, baby. Now, my wife and I, we bought this house last year because of the low interest rates, and we are sitting at a 2.875 interest rate on our house. But there is no chance at all that we are paying this house off early because of that. And for very good reason too. Compound interest. Why would I want to pay off my house early when I could be putting that additional money into the stock market where I would be getting an average 10% return on my money? Now, the answer might be slightly complicated because we're going to have to use math.
I'm afraid we need to use math.
But we're going to use really simple round numbers here to make it a lot easier. So you just bought a house, congratulations, and you got yourself a 30-year fixed rate mortgage with a monthly payment of $1,000. So in addition to that $1,000 that you have to use for the loan, you have an additional $1,000 that you are using to invest into an S&P 500 index fund. Now, with that $1,000 invested every month, starting from zero, with dividends reinvested, with an assumed 10% average annual return on your money, you would have just under $2 million saved up for retirement. Nice. Now, say instead of investing that money into the stock market, instead of investing that $1,000, you wanted to pay off your home loan early. So instead of making a $1,000 payment each month, you were making a $2,000 payment each month. This would effectively pay off your loan twice as fast, about 15 years. Now, I understand that the additional $1,000 would be going towards principal, so you would be paying it off slightly faster than 15 years, but again, we're using just simple round numbers here, so we're just gonna say 15 years. So 15 years go by, and your house is fully paid off. Congratulations, that's awesome. And now you have that $2,000 to begin investing into the same S&P 500 index fund, starting from zero, with dividends reinvested, with an assumed 10% average annual return. Now, instead of 30 years, for 15 years, the return on your money would be just about $760,000, meaning that you missed out on $1.25 million just because you wanted to get out of debt early. Was it worth it?
Bruh.
Now, of course, if you were to start paying off that house insanely fast, like I'm talking like less than 5 years, the numbers change quite a bit, and that would actually be to your benefit. But to be able to pay off a 30-year fixed rate home loan in like less than 10 years, the radical cost savings associated with that would be a lot for any one person or even a family to handle, and it's just kind of, it would be really, really hard to do that. Of course, it can be done, and it has been done by some of Dave Ramsey's followers, which, again, congratulations to them for doing that. But for the average person trying to build up wealth over time, it's a pretty difficult pill to swallow. And in my opinion, is not the best course of action. But again, as usual, this is not financial advice, entertainment purposes only. Reason number 2 that I think Dave Ramsey is out of touch and you should not listen to him anymore. The dude hates Bitcoin. and cryptocurrencies and alternative investments in general.
Just listen to me just a second. $100,000 into Bitcoin. That should scare your brains out. By nightfall, dude, cash it. If you really can, cash it out, and you may find out that this is funny money. I am not a fan of ultra high risk investments, and at a minimum, that's what we would call Bitcoin. At a minimum. We could call it a lot of other stuff too.
Whole lot of things.
Now, of course, this has a lot more merit to it considering his demographic. He's a slow growth investor in his 60s. The dude's a boomer. Now I'm going to have a blog post linked down below in the description where he talks about Bitcoin, so go check that out. It's my reference, my resource for this argument. Now from that blog post, he says that Bitcoin is too complicated and it's too volatile to start investing in. The post literally says, if you cannot explain it to a 7th grader, you have no reason whatsoever to be putting your money towards it. And that the only reason that Bitcoin has value is because that's the amount that someone's willing to pay for it. Now this might just be me kind of ranting a little bit at this point, but I find it extremely troublesome when Dave Ramsey has not taken the time to do the research to learn about cryptocurrencies to be able to help his listeners out with trying to invest in it. Dude, it's your job to help people with their money, and you won't even give Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies the time of day because it's hard? I find this very concerning, especially since Bitcoin was the best performing asset of the last decade. But the argument he's also making about how the only reason it has value is because that's the amount that someone is willing to pay for it is also fundamentally flawed. Now, the actual value of Bitcoin is not the token, but the technology that allows it to exist in the first place, the blockchain. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this because this isn't a crypto video, but essentially the blockchain is a decentralized public ledger that records every transaction that has occurred on it from the moment that Bitcoin was created up until right now when you're watching this video. It has very clear and transparent rules for how money transfers are to occur as well. Now, because of the decentralization as well, meaning it is not kept in one single place, versus something like a bank, which is centralized or is kept in a single place, it is almost impossible for it to be hacked, manipulated, or faked. And that's where the value of Bitcoin lies, on the blockchain. I just explained the value of Bitcoin when Dave Ramsey, probably the best known personal finance guru in the industry, wouldn't. Also, I mean, come on, the price that someone's willing to pay for Bitcoin, that's the reason it has any value at all. The only reason this house is worth $300,000 is because that's the amount that someone was willing to pay for it. The reason that Bitcoin is worth $60,000 right now is because that's the amount that someone is willing to pay for it. That's how supply and demand works. Now, there is something that I will agree with Ramsey on this one, and it's that you shouldn't put too much of your money into Bitcoin. However, I would just say to make it a small part of your portfolio, maybe maximum 5% or so. Buy it, hold it, don't even look at the price fluctuations, don't even think about the price, just buy it, hold it, and please take it off the exchanges. Just because the blockchain is virtually impossible to hack does not mean that the places that you buy your coins aren't unhackable. All right, moving on. Reason number 3 to not listen to Dave Ramsey: he hates credit cards. And I mean, he actually legitimately hates them.
The credit card is the cigarette of the financial world. There's no upside, it kills you.
He doesn't have credit cards, and he tells anyone that will listen to him that they should not have credit cards. And this advice is just downright damaging to your financial future. Of course, Dave believes that everyone is better off not using them because they open up the possibility for abuse. And for people with uncontrollable spending problems, this is very true. You should not be opening up credit cards or using them. This is when using cash and limiting your budget to the cash that you have is very, very useful. But here's the thing, a reasonable person would know not to overspend on their credit cards. Credit cards are not the problem. Personal responsibility and self-control with credit cards is the problem. Now, the reason that not having a credit card is a very bad idea is because credit cards are like the driving force of how credit scores are calculated. Credit scores are essential for any functioning adult's financial life, especially when it comes to things like loans and even in some situations, jobs. But more importantly, credit cards have amazing benefits sometimes. For example, not gonna brag, but I earned $180 back for one of the credit cards that I use. And this is with regular spending that I didn't need to do anything extra for. I never held a balance, never paid any interest fees. I simply used the card for purchases that I was already planning on making, paid it off each month, and I was good to go. You don't get benefits like that from cash, Mr. Ramsey. And it's super unfortunate that the people that follow his teaching so diligently are missing out on things like that. Now, I do need to compliment Dave Ramsey before I wrap this video up, and it's something that he does extremely well. He inspires people to get control of their finances. I can't bash the guy too much here because I'm here on YouTube trying to do the exact same thing. If you ever listen to his show or anything like that, a common theme on it is that people will call into the show, tell Dave Ramsey about all the debt that they're in or their financial situation, and he kind of like berates them a little bit, kind of yells at them or tells them that they're doing things incorrectly or stupid. People call in because they need a wake-up call. And his story of owning $4 million worth of real estate to going bankrupt is quite inspiring. And him and his net worth of now $200 million are very happy to give him the wake-up call that they need. Anyways though, those are the 3 big things that I disagree with Dave Ramsey on. There are other things as well, but they're not nearly as exciting as these points that I brought up. His advice, while still good in most respects, is a little outdated, especially considering the times that we live in. Now, I actually own one of his more recent books. It's called The Complete Guide to Money, and I've seen basically all of his like best of or some of his more recent YouTube videos, which allowed me to believe that I had enough information about him and knowledge to make this critique about him. Just want to give a little disclaimer that I'm not just like reading articles online and being like, oh yeah, I can make a video about Dave Ramsey. And obviously, if you made it this far, you probably, I would hope that you probably like what I'm trying to do here. My name is Kevin, and on this channel we talk about everything related to saving and making as much money as possible. And if you like that, and the fact that you made it all the way to the end of the video, it probably means that you do like that. Please consider sticking around and subscribing. If you liked the video, hit like. If you didn't like it, you know what button to push. Please comment down below, and I will see you in the next one.